good to be back in my sanctuary where I don't have to fear logos raining down from space or a chair shot leaving a mark on my eye. Those are the kinds of storylines that you can find here on WrestleBound. And if you don't have any idea to what I'm talking about, I think a recap is in order. And now, the WrestleBound Rebound is brought to you by nobody, because this show is too good for sponsorships, but it definitely wasn't because of viewers like you. Fuck you. I don't think this is something you can make up with alcohol, but maybe with a bit of cocaine. I can't continue to play this game with these controls and conditions. They're all just dreadful. It being one of the worst games I've played yet earns it 1.5 stars. Oh no. Look, Jake, can I just compromise with you here? I ordered a different wrestling game that's twice as bad as this can be, and it's short. What do you mean Brian's doing a game review of it? That little shit! Brian, what did you do with my new game? While that was playing, I was getting more of my drink. 'Cause I'm gonna need it with this. So everyone remembers the competition WWE has had to face over the decades. No one has forgotten the likes of WCW and ECW, and AEW is already leaving an Impact despite not being competition. Speaking of Impact, who among you remember total non-stop action? TNA Impact was the very first game to come from the company Jeff Jarrett started after being publicly fired by Vinnie Mac on the infamous simulcast. Originally hosting weekly pay-per-views under an affiliation with the NWA, TNA had momentum and stars of the past and present, and they were popular enough in the mid to late 2000s to warrant their own game. The honor of developing went to Midway Games, who you might remember making the WWF arcade game way back when. Talk about a defection 13 years in the making, though I find it interesting Electronic Arts and Rockstar were approached with making this wrestling game. That wasn't too abnormal for EA, but can you imagine what Rockstar would whip up? The game was released for the PS3 and Wii, as well as the PS2 and Xbox 360 for the North American and PAL regions during the September and October months of 2008. Support goes up to 4 players, and the ESRB rated it a T14. I don't know about you, but this box cover has encapsulated wrestling the best so far. We have the wrestling cyborg Kurt Angle front and center about to fist the TNA Impact logo, while Samoa Joe and Sting are by his sides, and behind them is the 5-time WCW champion about to take a phenomenal forearm from the Phenomenal One himself. If anything, this gets the 3 eyes right: intensity, interest, and eye-catchy. The back has a lot going on, but you can still make out the tagline of "Wrestling so real, you feel pain." I certainly feel the pain of looking at 2 screenshots of sleeper holds. We'll be going over 2 versions of this game today, one of higher ilk on the PlayStation 3, and one on the lower side of things on the Wii. We'll primarily stick to the PS3 version and bring up the Wii when it's time to compare something like graphics or features. Hope you stupid simpletons got that, cause I'm not gonna repeat myself. I wanna get this shit over with. I don't know if I should be surprised or shook seeing an opening hype package as opposed to gameplay. To be fair, it is very well done, making it sound more epic than it actually is, and I was ready to accept the worst, but then it pulled a 180 and transitioned to in-game graphics. Granted, it didn't show much, but I think they nailed the opening at the very least for those that are unaware of the product. If you're just tuning in on the 7th episode, openings that show graphics is a good sign, while openings that show only video may mean they have something to hide. but this shows both, so I don't know what to expect. I can tell you what I wasn't expecting, this long installation time. Like, holy shit, it took for fucking ever, which is the equivalent of 20 minutes. But oh man, how I'm glad this kind of stuff goes by quicker now on something like the Switch. My PS3 sounded like it was developing an irregular heartbeat, and I'm being dead serious. Have a listen. What in the fuck? The Wii didn't have the same installation process, nor did it have the FMV cutscene, so you'd be going in blind for the most part. Guess point of view who made this port couldn't figure that out. But now the PS3 is ready, so let's head into it. As per usual, we go straight into a standard one-on-one and take a look at the roster that, while it may not be much, is still packed with a bunch of stars you might recognize elsewhere. Like...
Sorry about your damn luck.
We coming for you, nigga.
And that guy who sued one of the worst films of all time for using his trademark. True story. There's also a lot of locked tits and asses, but I'm picking Bobby Roode because he's glorious. And he'll go against Scott Steiner, as I might have a chance if I do the numbers correctly. I mean, so long as it's not at Sacrifice, I have much of a chance than he does. But I don't know how these controls work yet. Guess I better crunch the numbers. You know, for 2008, these models look pretty close to the real deal. There's a lot of detail, and they got around long hair clipping by keeping it on the characters that have it. And look at the genetic freak, they got his muscles exactly right. At least for the time. Oh good, the results of my number crunch. What does Leroy Jenkins mean? I'm impressed with the visuals. But that crowd looks like crap and reminds you what era you're in. The controls, on the other hand, are simple but different. You have square to punch and X to kick, triangle grabs, and circle performs lots of actions like getting out of the ring. L1 is a strong modifier you can use with your buttons for stronger attacks, and R1 is for reversing. It wasn't the easiest scheme to get used to, especially when I confused L1 and R1 with what they do, so much so that I got my ass handed to me by Big Papa Pump. And it wasn't because I had fat asses! The Wii version looks pretty good, though not being in HD, and the controls are completely different as you would expect. I mean, going from this to this, you're only asking for trouble. I use the remote and nunchuck combo, but you can also use the classic controller if you prefer. A punches, B kicks, and swiping does the grabbing. The D-pad does a multitude of things, including blocking, reversing, and actions depending on what direction you press. C is run, Z is the strong modifier, but my main takeaway at the start was Freakzilla just pounding on me without letting me get in a lick. Then all of a sudden he just walked away to a different side of the ring. Then the game just froze. I think we'll come back to it when it's ready to work. Just need to send some initiative its way. Back on the PS3, round 2 isn't going any better, but I am learning some new things. Like submission holds use a button minigame that's kind of fun. And that's all I learned before losing again. Circle is used to pin because apparently that's the hardest thing to learn is how to pin in these fucking games. By round 3, I was able to get a hold of the controls better and understand what the goal was. Like most wrestling games, you have a meter that you can build up to a finishing move. If you build up to full impact, you'll need to lock up your opponent in order to hit your finisher. There's an additional stun meter below it that'll build up as you get hurt over time. When it reaches capacity, the character will be stunned until the meter goes back to 0, but until then you'll be left to the devices of your opponent. It's simple for you simps, but it'll take some time to get used to the controls even for the best wrestling gamers, myself included, and I still lost to the big bad booty daddy. Over on the Wii, things turned around for the better, though it took much longer to keep Scott Steiner down, but Bobby Roode finally kept his ass on the mat for the 3 count. Did I say rude? I meant rude! Not too terrible of a start, but I still need to find a win. I'm sure I'll get one in the remaining match types. Hopefully, for fuck's sake. In a tag team, I chose to be OG LAX going against the Motor City Machine Guns. I forgot to mention every match is a no DQ match, as there are chairs lying outside of the ring that you can use freely without punishment. If the constant low blows didn't give that fact away, the chairs will. Taking the New Blood Rising approach of not telling anyone about the no disqualification stipulation. But it's more fun in this sense. I won't say the use of chairs got me the win here, but it sure did help. Can't really trust foreign fighters, they always cheat their way to where they are now. Stereotypes makes wrestling inclusive for everyone. Since we can't use the copywritten term, a triple threat in this game is a free-for-all. I chose one of the faces of TNA and the Samoan Submission Machine, and I faced off against the other half of Beer Money and the former Reverend and resident of Dudleyville. It was more of a chaotic time with the third person involved. It'll make the contest longer, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it could be better suited to a multiplayer situation. I just realized there's no knockouts in this game, which is a shame, but it isn't without reason. TNA didn't have an official women's division until this game was in development, so it was too little, too late, and all we got were Christie's tips. No one's gonna admit it, but we all read that wrong the first time around. Things get really interesting when heading into the Ultimate X. If you're not familiar with this match type, the best way to describe it is like a combination of a scaffold match and a ladder match, just without the ladders and ropes form an X shape. The match type is usually reserved for the X division, what they call their cruiserweights, so I chose the young, phenomenal one to go against the Fallen Angel. A friendship and feud that has spanned across 2 decades. The less said about Claire Lynch, the better. Now, you can wrestle like normal to get things going, or you can get to the good part, where you climb up the turnbuckle, scale the ropes to get to the X in the middle that you have to unhook with a minigame of its own. You can attack your opponent while you're on the ropes in a couple different ways, as well as grab them when they're on the ropes to stop them from getting the X. This is a unique match type for this game, and perhaps the one to play out of all of them, as it's a lot of fun. It'll take a second to figure out what controls do what, but once you do, you'll be in for a good time, though not a long time. My win seemed to come pretty quick, but there is a free-for-all version, and I just added Shark Boy to the mix, but the results remain the same. One thing worth pointing out in free-for-alls is be sure to use the right stick to change focus so you can take down those on the ropes as opposed to the dumb computers on the ring mat with you. Over on the Wii, it gets a little worse. The match still goes well, but the AI is noticeably dumber, always targeting me more often than not. And I couldn't decipher what the manual meant by climbing to the X rope. It's actually the D-pad and Z, but it looked like it was left and right for the longest time, and I looked like an absolute idiot doing this. And we see here a breed of wrestler courting his prey in some makeshift dance. I won there too by the skin of my teeth, and we'll head back to the PS3 as each has the same match types with not much else of a difference besides look and controls. A submission match sounded decent, and I picked the first 2 peeps that came to mind with a classic submission maneuver, but it turned out to be a snooze fest with no sign of ending. I kept applying hold after hold, but the icon never submitted to Sexy Kurt. I didn't get to make his ankle hurt.
I suppose I didn't focus enough on a particular body part, but I got bored, so I decided to change the stipulation and put them in a Falls Count Anywhere match. This went much better, but I felt like by this point they were really pushing for different match types, as there isn't much of a difference other than, oh, you can pin outside the ring. One thing I noticed just now was the different entrance introductions, which is a nice touch of detail, but I wish they added more to the commentary.
It's Mike Tenay and Don West, which is fine, but they're in the vein of Battlegrounds or Warzone, where they don't say much or add enough to what's going on that you'll barely notice them. There's a tag team variation if you want to try that out. If you can't tell, I'm getting tired from boredom. Better take a shot. Ugh. Okay.
Last but not least is the handicap match that won't be fair to the lone player in the slightest. It's tornado rules for the pair, so it'll be really hard for the solo player to defend himself, but that's the most realistic match in the game, as a 2-on-1 assault could take down anybody, including a rhino. May they rest in eventual extinction.
Oh jeez, they're already ascending into the heavens. I just realized that out of all the unlocked wrestlers in the game, Rhino is the only full-time Impact star still around today. Everyone else has moved on to greener pastures. But can you blame them? Money talks.
Here comes the money. Money, 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 money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
I have no doubt you can earn a decent paycheck when you worked at TNA. You certainly got fewer dates to put your body through a lot of strain. I'm not sure exactly how to segue out of this, so let's just awkwardly talk about what the game has left. It has options that are your basic adjustable BS you'll find in every game. Their difficulty setting went by different names, and I pray to God that Indie was medium, cause I'm none the wiser. The extras have a lot of content to enjoy, where you can see the roster in more detail, though you can see the same info at the character select screen. But everything else is worth your time, like the tutorials explained by your favorite TNA wrestlers, go behind the scenes at Midway Games before bankruptcy got the better of them, and a few of their upcoming games that would only catapult them farther into debt. I refuse to believe Versus DC Universe is a mainline game in the Mortal Kombat series. It's no wonder they went in the bin. You can also watch a handful of matches, which is awesome, and I wish I could watch the first match in TNA, but then I remembered a little thing called copyright. It's a botch. The Wii doesn't have as much to show as the PS3 does, and it's missing the remaining features we'll be talking about, but it does have the story that we'll dive into in a moment. For now, let's see what they have to offer with Create a Player. By this point, they should have a whole lot of options to customize your cap, but I was a little disappointed with what was available. Not to say it was completely terrible, I managed to get to something resembling my greatness, and I made up for what I couldn't get by adding some fire.
I found a gimmick. I am your hot Benyo. Penyo means friend in Chinese. Don't ask me how I know that.
You freak, you got that from Sagwa. What are you, a child?
You'll be dead in 2 minutes if you don't fuck off.
If you want to play online, you better do it before the server shut down. It'll happen again before you know it. It's probably gone by the time anyone watches this, but you can enjoy the story mode still, where it's time for your cap to shine. So the story goes something like this. You were once known as a masked wrestler called Suicide, and on your way to the top you were told to take a dive by LAX, but didn't cause you wanted the fame and glory, so you get your shit kicked in.
Stereotypes makes wrestling inclusive for everyone.
You wake up in Mexico with no memory of who you were, and now you gotta work your way back from the literal bottom to get back to the top, and maybe regain your memory.
Stereotypes, inclusive for everyone. Now here's the funny thing about all this. The Suicide character would actually come to life in the promotion. He's been played by many dudes throughout the years, but now, I'm Suicide.
Suicide, come alive.
Nah, my version of the theme would go something like this.
So yeah, this game has one of the weirdest legacies of any wrestling game. The story though does serve a good purpose, that being to unlock things. As you go along, you can unlock more moves, arenas, and wrestlers.
Oh yeah.
I played a good 2 hours, and it isn't that different to what WWE games would do in the My Career mode several years later. It's linear, sure, but it's decent. The story on the Wii is slightly altered since you don't have the create a player to make yourself in. You're defaulted with this getup.
I look so much like a relative to Spawn. But that guy was too good for wrestling though. He went straight to Mortal Kombat 11. Isn't it weird how that shit works out?
TNA Impact went on to receive mixed to average reviews across the board. The versions of higher quality seemed to get higher praise, while those of lower quality got the opposite. But Midway thought it did well enough to get a sequel. I'd be optimistic as well before going bankrupt, and that's what Midway did the very next year in February. Most of its assets would be sold off to Warner Brothers, but it also left TNA without a gaming partner, and they never really found another long-term partner as they didn't have any other games come out past the 2010s. Technically, this game did come out on the DS and PSP under a different name, TNA Cross the Line, but handheld ports tend to be different, so I may look at this some other time. The only other games TNA had were 2 released on mobile devices, but I'm sure you guys care about those as much as you care about TNA.
For better or worse, NWA TNA Total Nonstop Action Global Force Impact Wrestling has left, pun intended, an impact. They've introduced plenty of rising stars before anyone else knew about them, and have had some good moments in the past and in the last decade, but most will remember it for its worst moments and being a safety net for WWE's aging and rejected stars. There's a lot to poke fun of the promotion, but this game isn't one of them.
TNA didn't do bad choosing Midway to make their wrestling game in their dying days, as they were able to pull off a fairly decent one out of it. The PS3 obviously shines the brightest, though its controls will take a bit for the casual or even regular wrestling gamer to get used to. It's got enough match types, including the Ultimate X that you won't find anywhere else, and plenty of content outside of the exhibitional matches to keep you busy for a while. The Wii version is obviously missing features, but not a whole lot to take away fully from what the game has to offer. It can still be an enjoyable experience, but if Point of View put enough effort in, they could have added the cap or videos in.
Were they still having trouble putting in full motion video on a Nintendo system? You realize this is an optical disc, not a cartridge, right?
All in all, this is better than I think anybody gave it credit for. If you can try it, do so with friends. It'll make the experience so much better and make the Ultimate X even more epic.
If we got anything from this, it was suicide, and you can take that as you will, but I'm giving the Wii port 2 stars, while the PS3 gets 3 stars. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some business to attend to. Boom, bitch! That's what you get, you blue bastard! Think twice next time, sucker!